to the podcast where two longtime friends and sometimes a guest talk about their favorite games from the perspective of an average player. My name is Andrew Kimball.
And I'm Dylan Wren, and we are your friendly neighborhood gamers.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the neighborhood, and thank you for spending part of your day with us today. If you are a returning listener, thank you and welcome back. And if this happens to be your first episode, thank you and welcome to the show. On this episode, we're going to be talking about Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. I just realized I said Sekiro there, and I almost always say Sekiro, and it really threw me off.
It was like, oh, we're going with a different pronunciation this time.
Yeah, but Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice is a 2019 action-adventure game developed by FromSoftware and published by Activision. The game follows a shinobi known as Wolf, who attempts to take revenge on a samurai clan that imprisoned him and kidnapped his lord. The gameplay is focused on stealth, exploration, and combat, with a particular emphasis on boss battles. It takes place in a fictionalized Japan during the Sengoku period and makes strong references to Buddhist mythology and philosophy. Sekiro was released for PlayStation 4, Windows, and Xbox One in March 2019, and for Stadia in October 2020. Rest in peace.
Right.
Lead director Hidetaka Miyazaki wanted to create a new intellectual property that marked a departure from their Dark Souls series, looking at games such as Tenchu for inspiration. Sekiro was praised by critics who complimented its gameplay and setting and compared it to Dark Souls, although opinions on its difficulty were mixed. It won several year-end awards and sold over 5 million copies by July 2020. I think that last little blurb there is probably where this conversation is going to park for a while in this episode. Opinions on its difficulty were mixed.
Yes. Now, before we jump into it, I just want to take the reins here for a second. If you're listening to this, if you're going to continue to listen to this, we're gonna need to make a little social contract here. If you cannot handle criticism being levied at a game that you like, go ahead and just turn this episode off. That's okay. We don't need your listen. If you can handle differences of opinions and recognize that people like different things and can have differences of taste and what they look for in a game, feel free to continue listening. I think we can have a good conversation.
We've talked about this game. I would say that Sekiro, next to maybe Majesty, has been the most brought up game on the podcast that we haven't actually done an episode on, and we're fixing that here.
Yeah.
So it's pretty well documented, our differences in opinions, and we're both of the opinion that it's a good game.
Yeah.
Just we have different opinions on, is the core concept that they were going for fun moment to moment? And that's kind of where I think this conversation is going to be interesting, because generally speaking, a lot of the games that we talk about are games that we both like because we both played them, we both finished them, it overlaps that we both played them, so we can both talk about them. And most of the time when that happens, it's a game we both enjoy. This one, I mean, I think it's, well, we'll see. I haven't actually gotten your full thoughts on the game.
Yeah, we've avoided talking about it.
So I'm curious to see exactly where you'll fall, but I don't think that you're going to come in here being I just dedicated all this time to completing a game that I think is a hot piece of trash, and now I'm going to roast it for an hour. But I do think you're going to have some criticisms, and I do think that most of those are valid for all the trolling and the character and bits that you play. I think that, what we're going to discuss here it's just differences in opinions.
Yeah, I finished the game, and I'm not going to have to push us to redo our FromSoftware game rankings for our YouTube channel. I finished it and I was like, yep, I would still put this in last place out of all the FromSoftware games that are in the Souls, Bloodborne, Demon Soul, Sekiro, that contemporary list of games, I was like, yep, this would still be my least favorite FromSoftware game.
With that being said, why don't we kind of start from the beginning, I guess, with our experiences with Sekiro. For me, it's pretty straightforward. It's basically my Bloodborne story, but more condensed. I'm pretty sure Sekiro is the game I tried to get into like next after finishing Bloodborne, the next FromSoft game, and it was brutally difficult and very different, like a different kind of muscle memory or what they were asking of me coming straight off Bloodborne. And so I didn't get very far, like knowing what I know now, but I got decently far before dropping it. But it was the same thing as Bloodborne, where I always had that kind of nagging voice in the back of my head saying, give it another shot. I really want to like this game. And so then, yeah, found a couple like beginner's tips videos, like how to basically get some momentum in this game. And then once some of those things kind of clicked for me, then it was all over and I beat it and had a really good time. Well, I didn't beat it, which we'll talk about. I got to the last the last boss and then something else came out. I don't even know what it was. Something took my attention away. And then I always was like saying to myself, man, it's going to be really hard to go back and just jump into the final boss, which it was, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. What was your experience with Sekiro?
Yeah, so mine was coming from somebody who really enjoyed like the Dark Souls series, got into Dark Souls 1 way back in the day, played through 2, played through 3, played through Bloodborne. Played this before I played Bloodborne because I didn't have a PS4 at the time, but I think I got Sekiro either when it came out or shortly after it came out. I got it the year it came out. I think I probably picked it up on like a sort of end of year sale, like the year it came out, and won like Game of the Year from like the Game Awards and a bunch of other outlets.
Yeah, so like late 2019, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I probably picked it up late 2019, loaded into it, and it was not necessarily what I was expecting. Like there's a lot of similarities in a lot of ways to FromSoftware's, games, because FromSoftware heavily relies on a lot of the same kinds of like things. Like their game design is one that like they can do a lot of different things with it, but still have that sort of feeling of familiarity. So like I went in and I was like, okay, I'm collecting these things that are, the sort of equivalent to souls. I'm resting, at these statues, which are the equivalent of bonfires. I'm, kind of figuring out some of that stuff. But it was also, a lot different than a lot of other FromSoftware games. And I think that is really evident in the combat that we'll talk about later. So I played through and got to, like, the first time I probably barely made it into the first, like, time you jump into the past. Like, I probably made it into there and was exploring around in there and kind of just was like, all right, I'm not really having that much fun with this. It's frustrating. I'm going to go play a different game that I also got on sale, And then it probably was about a year later, I came back, I played through it, probably got to about Lady Butterfly, beat her, like beat the bull, kind of like to that place where it kind of opens up into like you can go a couple of different directions.
Right.
So I did that and pretty much hit that same point where I was just kind of like, okay, I've gotten further. I'm still not really, like, I'm not necessarily having the most fun with this. I'm going to go play something else. And so that kind of became the tradition where like every December-ish, I would pick the game back up and, try it. I'd get a little bit further each time and just kind of fall off of it at that point. Until this most recent time where I was finally just like, okay, like I'm just going to like power through it. Maybe, it's one of those where if I just play it a little bit longer, I will kind of get the hang of it. And this was also I think the first time I had played it since playing Bloodborne. I don't know if that helped or not, but kind of a different sort of style of FromSoftware game that I got a chance to play. And so this time I did make it all the way through. I beat, I think, every boss. I'm not 100% on that. Well, I guess I didn't beat the ones that didn't happen in my story or whatever.
I think you beat every boss except for what you needed for the Shura ending. And we'll talk about that. This is a good opportunity for me to mention kind of how we're going to structure this. It's tricky with a FromSoft game because people consider different things spoilers, like end-game bosses and things like that. But we're going to save more story-heavy conversation and the endings we got and stuff like that for the end of the episode. And we'll try to keep the front half more spoiler-free, but what we think is spoiler-free may not be exactly what you think it is. So just, bear that in mind as we continue through this conversation. Because at this point, I think if we mention certain boss names, I feel like that's fair game, but we won't necessarily talk about which ending we got and what we had to do to get it and that kind of thing. And, how it affected the story if we dive into that towards the end of the conversation. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
So I think you would have had to have beaten every boss except for the Shura ending bosses based on just the couple conversations we've had, brief conversations. But
so I finally got through it. I finally finished it. And it's a good game. I can't say that it's a poorly made or a
low quality
game.
Yeah.
But we'll definitely get into more of just all of the things that I maybe have some criticisms on, or just not necessarily criticisms I'm going to play armchair game developer here and be well, FromSoftware, actually what you need to do is you need to do this. But just things that I didn't personally or things that I, when I'm looking for a game, there's a lot in this game that I like, and there's a lot in this game that I'm just oh, so close to greatness, and yet the setting's super cool, and so it's just it has the potential. Setting super cool. A more straight. I hesitate to say that it has a more straightforward story than, because it does in a lot of ways. It has way more cutscenes and actual characters telling you story beats than any other FromSoftware game, I think. But also, I still had to, after I beat it, I still threw on Vati Vidya to explain to me all of the symbolism and stuff that I didn't get because I am not well versed in Japanese mythology. So
yeah, for sure. It's not as, I guess, digestibly delivered as your God of War, your Spider-Man, whatever. But compared to every other FromSoft game, this one very much feels for me anyways, it was easier to keep up with the main cast of characters. You understood their motivations, and you had a clear goal, and you were part of the story and the world in a way that you aren't necessarily in other FromSoft. It feels like in other FromSoft games, you're dropped into the world after something has happened, and then you're kind of putting together what has happened as you kill off all of the main characters from the story before. And this, you feel like you're much more of an active participant in the story. I mean, Wolf, Sekiro, he talks, he has a voice actor, he has lines. Those are some of the things that they were able to do, having just the one character and actually giving him a personality, rather, not much of a personality, but a personality versus being able to make your own character and them not really getting that in all the other FromSoft games.
Yeah. This guy is basically Guts from Berserk in characterization, where it's just kind of the sort of gruff, or I guess very early on what you would expect from a Geralt of Rivia sort of thing, where it's just before you maybe get to know a lot of the background stuff with him, and he's just kind of gruff and
to
very
the point.
Stoic to the point, But it was it was a good game. So like, if that's what you need to hear, like, it's a good game. If you want to come back later and hear more about it, and you just were like, do they think it's good or not? Yeah, it's good. So
I think that a majority of this conversation, and we're getting there, is the differences that FromSoft made with this game versus all the other games. Because you were talking about them earlier. Like, I know what a bonfire in this game is. I know what souls are in this game. All of FromSoft games revolve around that loop of when you die, you lose some currency and all the enemies come back. This one is no exception. However, they tweaked almost everything in some way.
yeah.
Your souls in this game is gold or money, and you don't get to pick it back up on death. Like,
no, you just
it gets halved.
Straight half.
Yeah, and that's it. Now, you can put it into bags in your inventory where you won't lose it. And I think that's something that I think we'll talk about. I don't think a lot of the differences that they did on like the grander scale really added up to that much to me. Like the gold thing.
Like little differences like that. Yeah, it's, small tweaks to what you're used to, I think.
Yeah, the unseen aid, the dragon rot, like little things like that they did were more, I guess, flavoring. And I think FromSoft always kind of has this problem, but it was really apparent in Sekiro. My inventory was just full of stuff that I never used.
Yeah.
Like all the balloons and all the, it was really like divine confetti and a couple sugars is like all I ever used.
Yeah, because it's, and like you said, that's kind of a symptom of all FromSoftware games. Elden Ring, I ended with so many things that I don't even know what half of them do in my inventory, because unless I ran into issues with the boss and looked it up and was told to use a specific item to get an edge on it, I just fought usually without items,
But you bring up Elden Ring, and that's a good, I think, comparison, because you would think Elden Ring, you have essentially what feels like infinite weapons, infinite build possibilities, whereas in Sekiro, you are Sekiro. You do the one thing. You would think they could have tailored items a little bit more efficiently, being that it's like just a linear game with like the one character with the one sword. Like, I guess what I'm saying is I can forgive it a little bit easier in the other games where it's like, well, this item doesn't really work for my heavy armor greatsword build, but it might have worked if I was using a katana or whatever, or if I was doing bleed or something like that. So yeah, but like you were saying, it's a symptom of.
Well, and it's also like one of those things in any FromSoftware game, at least for me, where there's and it's one of those things that I enjoy about the game, because it does provide that tension of like, if I die, there are consequences to my death. A lot of other games don't necessarily have that in quite the same way. Like, they may set you back progress wise or something, but like this, it's like, oh, you use those items, those are gone now. Oh, you collected a bunch of money, well, half of it's gone now. Oh, you collected a bunch of experience from like killing people, half of that's gone now too. And so I'm always way more hesitant to use items in a FromSoftware game, because if I die, not only is that item burned for something that wasn't successful, but usually getting more of said item is a hassle. That means you either have to go farm somewhere to get enemies to drop it, or you have to have progressed the game far enough that you can buy it from a vendor, but that also means you need money to do that. And if you don't have, like, if you are losing half your gold every time you die, like, you don't have a lot of wiggle room there either. And so it's like, okay, can I brute force my way through this, or just get good enough to do this without the item? And then it's like, usually I would reserve the items for like, I'm almost there. I'm on the cusp of beating this boss, or getting through this area. Let me just pop, like I've died kind of close to here. If I pop this item, that'll give me the little boost I need to like finish out this area or finish this boss off,
Yeah.
Like there were way more items in the game than I was expecting for such a small experience. But you brought up one of the biggest differences from like a Dark Souls or Elden Ring or even Bloodborne, and that is you basically just like there's no differences of armors. I think you can like once you beat the game or once you get to a certain point, I think it gives you like different cosmetic armors and stuff.
Rolling into New Game Plus, I got a new outfit, but that's purely cosmetic.
Yeah, like it doesn't do anything. You never get like, I mean, I guess you basically use the same sword the entire game. Like you're not getting anything different there. You do get some like different shinobi weapons or shinobi tools, I think they're called.
Yeah, for the prosthetic arm.
But those are more like supplementary. You're not going into a fight only using shinobi tools. Like I'm sure there's someone on YouTube that has beaten the game solely with shinobi tools, but that is not the way that the game is meant to be played, you know? So, whereas, you know, even Bloodborne, which arguably has like the fewest options, still has like, 20, 25 different weapons that each have like a couple of forms that you can use. So going through this, and it's just kind of like, okay, you're playing the entire game and pretty much the upgrades that you're getting are just like different like ways to counter or different like sort of combos that you can set or different tools that you can like, here's an axe that breaks shields, you know? Like it feels a lot more like a Batman like Arkham game where it's like you get upgrades that let you deal, but you're still just Batman punching things when it comes down to it.
Yeah, you get, so that was another thing that I was going to touch on when we were talking about gold. Gold is not souls in this because that isn't, it looks gold. That might not be what it actually is. It might be like sin or...
Yeah. I forget what they call it, but they basically broke souls into two separate things. Like there's an experience
XP
one
in this game. Yeah.
And the experience is only set to like level up moves, and then the gold is only for buying like items and stuff. Whereas in like every other FromSoftware game, both are used. Souls buy both things instead of just the one.
So you have to choose, like, do I want to spend my currency on items that could help me or another level that could help me, more stats. Whereas this, so with you have the shinobi prosthetic on the one arm, which basically allows you to use items that are situational, like essentially a shield, an axe that can break enemy shields, fire, which like, you know, affects beasts, things like that, which, you know, allow some variation or some situational tools that can help you gain the upper hand in particular fights. And then on the other side, you get like scrolls or texts that have combat arts, they call them. And this is another place where it was like they deviated heavily from their Dark Souls formula. And I think that it was a good first attempt, but you know, if they were going to, I could see it being much better in like a future game because
like a lot Armored Core.
Yeah, like a Sekiro 2, which will never happen, but
no, because then it would have to be Xbox exclusive.
Yeah, or it wouldn't, or Activision would have to like relinquish the rights to it, which Bloodborne's and Demon Souls are Sony exclusive, so they could have an Xbox exclusive game. Why not?
Yep.
But basically you learn like which moves are essential or which upgrades are essential. Like there's some that give you, and we'll talk about the posture meter and stuff, but like some that heavily affect how much posture damage you're giving and taking, how much health you're giving and taking. The Makiri counter is essential. And then the rest of it is kind of like, if you want to mess around with this, you can, but the majority of the actual moves that you unlock, like I never really used.
Yeah, like, because they had a couple of different, I guess, styles of those moves. Like they had some that were just like a passive bonus to, you know, like how much gold you were getting or something like that. Or like how stealthy you could be. They had
how many of the like currency you need to use your prosthetic you could hold.
Yeah. They had some that gave you like a thing that you could do, but it didn't take up like a slot to use it. And so like the Makiri counter, like once you get that, you can always just do the Makiri counter. There's another one that like lets you jump off enemies in midair or something like that, or lets you parry in midair. You didn't have to equip anything to do that.
Right.
Once you unlocked it, you just had that ability from then on. And then there were some that like, I think there were 2 slots that you could equip like a move into. There was like the active combat move, and then there was like the stealth combat.
Yeah, there was
I
was trying to remember the active combat. The other one, the blue one, is ninjutsu. But
and so
then there was the other one that was red that I can't remember the name of, where you put Ichimonji double and you never swap it out with anything else.
Yeah, basically. And so like there are a bunch of moves you could buy there, like Andrew was saying, but those are so situational most of the time anyway. And then so you find the one that works in the most situations and you buy that and you just kind of use that. And then if you're having trouble with a boss and you look it up and it's like, try this move instead, maybe you like work your way through the upgrade tree to buy that one instead. But
right.
And you know, that's not necessarily like, I'm sure if I was better at the game or something, you know, experimenting with those might be more fun. But like as it was, I was just kind of like, I mean, the combat, which we'll get more into later, like it never felt like the bosses, it never felt like I needed to really use those a ton because most of those are just wars of attrition. And then the regular enemies, like most of the time they're dying in just a couple of hits anyway. So I also didn't need to use like the combat arts or whatever, the special. So
yeah, and I think I heard somewhere that the skill tree and the prosthetic upgrade path are intentionally unobtainable, like unfillable on one playthrough. So there's a lot of stuff there that you can play around with on like New Game Plus or New Game Plus 2, where you really love the game, you're really wanting to like do something different on this playthrough. But for the most part, to get through Sekiro, you need to get good at the combat.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest departure from all the other games.
Well, before we get to that, though, I do want to touch on the biggest thing for me that was the difference between like other FromSoftware games and this. And that is the exploration. Every other FromSoftware game opens up the world. And there's a bunch of like around every corner, there's, you know, a little glowing thing that you can go and you can pick up. And it's like, oh, here's a new sword, or here's some new armor, or here's an item. You know, like there are a lot of items that you pick up, you know, and maybe aren't that worth it. Like early on in Dark Souls 1, it's like, oh, here's some rubbish. Good job.
Yeah.
But, you know, like there's just so many things and so many places that you can explore in those games. To me in Sekiro, it never felt worth it to explore. Like there was never anything that I was picking up for the most part that I was like, oh man, like this is, I'm so glad I wandered down this like alleyway and fought through 15 dudes, you know, like it was pretty much always like, oh, okay. Because most of the prosthetics are either tied to like bosses or something, or they're, you know, fairly well signposted. I think like the Raven Feather one was like the furthest off the beaten path, but pretty much everything else is basically like right off the beaten path, and fairly well signposted. And so that was, to me, the biggest change from like outside of the combat, was just like, oh, hey, you know, like here's this big, beautiful world to explore and all of these things that you can pick up. But to me, almost none of the things that I picked up felt worth picking up because, as I said, we didn't really use the items a whole lot. And it was kind of like, all right, you know, like it's not like I was getting sacks of gold most of the time where I could like, oh, this will help me buy some new, you know, upgrades. It was always just kind of like, nope, stay on the beaten path. If you get off the beaten path, you're much more likely to die, which is going to set you back even more. So like, don't explore. It felt like I was being punished for exploring basically in this game.
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with you, except for where you said this big, beautiful world, because I don't think the world of Sekiro is that big. At least it's not big. Yeah. It's not wide, I guess. Like I think of, you know, a level in Bloodborne or something. You kind of know where you need to go, but you could also like poke around some other spots within that like area, you know, like the Forbidden Woods or something. This felt much more to me like when you get to Ashina Castle, then you have like 4 or 5 directions you can go, but each of those directions is going to be pretty linear. And your reward to me, outside of just, progressing the game, is fighting through the enemies, persevering, getting through, and then being rewarded with some sort of ridiculous, awesome looking area, but it's not necessarily like an area that you're like, oh, I can't wait to go poke around here. It's like, wow, this looks really cool. All right, let's go through it. It's not, because a lot of the places you end up like look really crazy, or there's something really weird going on there, like a giant snake, or I think that they did a really good job in designing the locations. But yeah, I think it's intentional. This isn't really a game where they want you to necessarily go poking around every corner. It's more about fighting through it.
Yeah, well, and like on your way to Ashina Castle, before you fight like the guy on the horse.
Yeah.
Like there's that big open courtyard with a bunch of dudes like kind of wandering around in there. And like I went down there, I killed all the dudes, I explored around, and it was like a few just like consumable items and maybe a bag of gold or something like that, but pretty much nothing.
You mean like before you fight the guy on the horse?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the only other thing in there is one of those like memory spirit things. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, I went through all of that, and it was just kind of like, oh, okay. There was no point in coming down here. And so it was just kind of like, all right, I'm going to, because in this game you can use like a little grappling hook to just kind of like grapple up. And so I just skipped that entire area every time. And that's, I guess, what I'm like, there are a lot of places like that, like right after the chained ogre dude in like on your way to Ashina Castle, it like you go in and there's that big courtyard with like the boss at the bottom and a ton of dudes just kind of like wandering around guarding. Like you can stealth your way through that area and try to stay out of sight and kill everybody that way. You can fight your way in and probably die if you're just taking everybody on like face first, or you can just like skip that area. Like you can just like grapple hook over everybody, raise the alarm, but then jump. Like there are 2 directions you can go from there that are just like, okay, jump past and here's like a little bonfire, and when that is the ideal option, because killing that boss will get you like a prayer bead or something, which increases your health, so it's kind of worth it. But when the optimal strategy is like just run past, because there's not really anything worth getting in here anyway unless you really want that prayer bead, like to me that's just not rewarding my exploration. That's just kind of telling me like mainline the bosses, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, which I think is what this game was. They were going for more of that. It's more of like what the Tenchu, which I've never played, but they were going for more of an action game. And I think that that courtyard, for example, or the first one you mentioned, when I went back and replayed the game, yeah, I skipped that spot every time. But if I was new to the game, or if I was playing and I knew I was only a few XP drops away from the ability I wanted or needed or whatever, I think that's what that's more for, is practicing and leveling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I mean, in most Soul games, once you have explored the area or know it, you run through to the boss anyways. Just like, I mean,
yeah, but I mean, like, I guess when I've played through other FromSoftware games, like Elden Ring or whatever, it's like, yeah, technically, if I'm like I've beaten the game, I've done pretty much everything that there is to do in that game. And if I'm going back through on a new character, it's like, do I need to go into like every little nook and cranny, every little dungeon in the world? No. Like if I have a clear idea of what I want this character to be, I can choose to just go into the dungeons that will get me stuff towards that build or whatever. It's like if the reward for beating this dungeon is like a sword that scales off of faith, and I'm not doing a faith build or something like that. It's like, okay, I could skip that. But there's an actual cool reward at the end of that versus like, oh, I went into this, area in Sekiro, cleared everything out, and I scavenged around, and it was like a couple of balloons and like some Buddhist candy. And it was like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. I think for me, I enjoy the act of clearing those things out enough that's reward enough for me. But I definitely see where you're coming from, because I think you enjoy that aspect of these games. Like, that is the core kind of element of the things that you come to these games for, whereas it's definitely part of it for me, but I wouldn't say that it's like the main part.
Yeah.
So like for me, that section right after the burning ogre or whatever, I love that little spot because I'm good at it now. And I think that's the reward for me with Sekiro, is when the first time I played that spot, like, I was just getting destroyed. But now I go in there and it's like, I feel like, oh, these guys have to fear me, which I think that's the thing that clicks with people or doesn't with this game, is that combat progression and efficiency, and feeling like you're the threat as opposed to feeling threatened running through these environments. And I think that just worked better for me than it did for you. We mentioned something in that conversation that I forgot to talk about that I think is a good transition into combat. And you mentioned the grappling hook, which is one thing. Traversal in this game is crazy compared to all other FromSoft games. Everybody was blown away that you could jump and sneak in Elden Ring. I was trying to remember, could you crouch in the other ones? And no, you can't. You can tell that Sekiro is kind of the redheaded stepchild, because nobody ever talked about, well, you could do that in Sekiro. But the other thing was stealth. Yeah, it's pretty basic stealth. It's like hide in bushes, shimmy around corners, that kind of thing. But especially considering what games had come before it, like, for them to lean so heavily, which you couldn't really make a shinobi game without having some sort of stealth in it. And I think that's pretty fun. I do think that a lot of times the stealth is more pattern memorization than anything else.
To me, the stealth part did not always do a great job of signposting. Not that it needed to, but it wasn't always very clear of like, is this an area you can like stealth in?
Right.
Or is this set up to be a combat encounter?
And I think it's more, a lot of it is, okay, I'm going to go in and stealth as many as I can, and I'm going to end up in combat at some point. Let me see if I can get off a few quick kills before that happens to even the odds. Because it's not set up like a Metal Gear or a something like that. You're still intended to fight. That is the core gameplay of this game. But having that option just added a little bit of, I think, a unique element to Sekiro, that especially looking what was before it, ignoring Elden Ring, it was really unique for FromSoftware.
Even with Elden Ring in there, it's like stealth. It's not like you're playing a stealth build in Elden Ring.
Right. True.
You can usually like get the drop on a guy or something like that, but that's about it. Whereas this, like, it almost felt at times more like an Assassin's Creed or something like that. I always wanted it to be way more of an Assassin's Creed than it ended up being, but that was, I still haven't played Ghost of Tsushima, but I feel like that game is what I wanted this game to be.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think you're really going to like Ghost whenever you dive into it. So yeah, the stealth not working always leads to combat, which is like the core component of this game. And combat is also very different from anything that FromSoftware had done before, and they leaned into it 100% wholeheartedly. And
yes,
if it doesn't click for you, then it doesn't click for you. There's not really another option. So what they did, traditionally from software games, you have a stamina meter, And the stamina meter allows you to do so many actions before it has to refill, and then it refills automatically, but you can't do anything while it's refilling. And so that kind of creates this ebb and flow, this give and take in combat, and you can do things with your build to increase stamina, etc. So you're very fast in this game. I remember coming off Bloodborne and jumping into this and feeling like I was Sonic the Hedgehog or something, because I was like running through these levels.
You were in a bad game.
The other thing that they did, because there's no stamina, is they created this posture system.
Yes.
That I think is really cool. I think it's a really cool concept.
Yeah, I like the idea of the posture system.
Yeah.
And like it's good enough that like games like Sifu and Jedi Fallen Order and stuff have kind of lifted that concept and put it in their games.
Yeah. So what that is there's more than one way to kill an enemy. You can either whittle down their health, or you can break their posture and open them up to what's called a death blow in Sekiro. And there are the ways to break their posture is to fill up this posture meter, and you do that by either deflecting their attacks on you or attacking them. And that's where the parry mechanic comes in. That is basically, if you boiled everything down to what people either like or dislike about this game, it probably all comes down to the parry mechanic and whether or not you jive with it. Also, not being able to make builds is probably second place on that list. But so you can block. Sekiro himself has a posture meter as well, and so enemies can break yours and leave you open for a big attack. And so you can block, which will negate damage but build up your posture. Or if you parry, if you block right at the same time as an enemy's weapon is hitting, then you will parry and you will turn the posture damage back on them. And so most of the grunts, it's usually like a couple hits or a couple parries, like you mentioned, and you can death blow them. The bosses, it's like you said, much more battle of attrition, and they usually it takes multiple death blows to actually win the fight. It's not just one.
Minimum 2, sometimes like 4 or 5 or whatever.
Except for a couple bosses, there's like 1 or 2 where it's just 1. And there's a lot of mini bosses in this game, which also usually take 2. And so that is the core idea. So you have your parries, you have your attacks, and then you have prosthetic attacks you can do. And then you have your Mikiri counter where you can deflect thrust attacks. You have a jump, which can dodge sweep attacks. And then I think that's pretty much it. Like that is the tool set and what you'll be countering. And the combat is fast, it's unforgiving, it's brutal. And the thing that broke my brain initially that I had to kind of get over was you cannot really dodge in this game.
No.
It's not like Dark Souls or Bloodborne where like dodge roll is an effective strategy, and you don't want to be defensive. The only thing you should be doing other than attacking is countering or parrying. If you're in a fight, you should be the aggressor at all times. And that was a very hard lesson to learn coming off Bloodborne and what little bit of the Dark Souls games I had played at the time when I first played Sekiro. Because my gut reaction was, oh, they're attacking, let me dodge away. And Sekiro does this kind of like slide away thing, but almost always it's not far enough. And almost always you get caught by whatever the attack was. And you were better off blocking that, jumping over it, countering it with like a Mikiri, or just parrying it. And that's the other thing that was a little bit tricky for me at first was it doesn't matter if you're fighting a gorilla. It doesn't matter if you're fighting a dude on a horse. It doesn't matter if you're fighting some mystical spirit. You can block or parry, and you're supposed to. And so for me, coming from Bloodborne, it was like, yeah, when I'm fighting the hunters, there's one strategy because they're like me, they're little. But if I'm fighting a beast, like I wouldn't try to block this beast. Like I'm going to try to roll away. And so relearning that in Sekiro, that no, it doesn't matter if this thing is like 4 times your size, like parry it. Once I learned that, and once I figured out the right like way to consistently pull off the Mikiri counter, that was kind of when the game really like opened up for me. And when I realized that, oh no, if if I'm in combat with another enemy, I need to be attacking. And then when I hear a certain sound cue, now it means that I need to go on the defensive, block or parry, whatever they're about to do. And as soon as they stop, I need to start attacking again. And once I kind of got those like fundamentals down, that was when the game really like clicked for me and I started actually making real progress.
Yeah. Because I think you're exactly right. Like all of the FromSoftware games are about like getting in that rhythm, and all the Dark Souls and Demon Souls and Elden Ring, like they all have pretty much the same rhythm for the most part. And then Bloodborne was a little bit of a different rhythm, but it was familiar enough that like if you had played a Dark Souls game, like you could like it's fairly easily transferable into that. And the rhythm was a lot different because like in all of those games, it's about looking for your openings and, getting the damage in when you can. And that's no different in Sekiro. It's just the way that you get to that is, instead of like in a Dark Souls game where you might be, sitting there with your big shield up, letting the enemy, do their combo. And then when their combo is done, you go in, you get your 3 hits in and, you start blocking again or whatever it is, or you roll around, you dodge a couple of attacks, you get your hits in Bloodborne. In this game, like you said, it's either like you're basically attacking and then you're deflecting and then you're attacking and then you're deflecting. It's like, okay, I'm going to hit you 5 times and then you're going to try to hit me 7 times and then I'm going to hit you 6 times. And then, it's like, it's that basically until like the end game where you start getting like, okay, I'm going to hit you 1 time and then you're going to hit me 47 times. And then I'm going to hit you 1 time and then, and it is a very different rhythm. The idea is cool. I always liked the idea. I thought like the posture system I thought was cool. And like just kind of the sort of like almost samurai movie style of just like a bunch of swords clashing, but no one like really doing damage until like you finally break their posture and get the killing blow in there. It's cool. I like that idea. In practice, I never felt like it was like running around killing the grunts always felt pretty cool. At a certain point though, it was just kind of like, all right, these guys are just kind of like in my way. Like I'm not necessarily feeling challenged by this until they'd like throw a new enemy at you who you weren't maybe familiar with like their move set, or some of those enemies are just kind of a little broken and I did not like them.
Like which ones?
But I don't feel like I ever felt good. The old guys in like the blue that would like hold the sword over and do like the Ichimonji combo to you. Like I never felt like I got those guys very well down. There later on in the game, there were like these owl people that would like jump around a bunch and like throw like a little spinny thing at you.
Yep.
I never felt like I got those guys down very well. And then like way late in the game when you go to like the divine place, there was like one enemy in there that I think had like a spear and some lightning that I never felt like I got a good grasp on. But for the most part, like most of the enemies, it's just kind of like, okay, I'm going to deflect these 3 things. I'm going to hit you twice and that opens you up for a killing blow and boom, done. Which when you're doing that, when you're like fluidly doing that, feels really cool. But I don't feel like, I know originally when I played through the game, I did not know, like the Makiri counter just did not make sense to me. I didn't feel like it was making sense. The part of that was because every now and then when an enemy is doing, I forget what they call it, like a dangerous move or something like that, there will be like a little flash,
perilous,
like sign, perilous attack.
Yeah.
They will flash a red sign on your screen, letting you know that they're about to make a perilous attack. And so like the first enemy that starts doing things that you can Makiri combo or counter doesn't just only do things to Makiri counter. They do other moves as well. And so my first couple of attempts playing this, I guess it was not clicking for me that this was not like, they were not tutorializing, oh, okay, this is the enemy for you to like sit here and try to get good at Makiri countering. It was like, this is the enemy that will do a thing you can Makiri counter, but they're also doing sweep attacks and they're also doing just like a straight up one that you have to just get out of the way or parry, And so I kept dying, and it wasn't making sense that I'm like, I'm doing the Makiri counter. Why isn't it working? Eventually I was able to get a handle on that. But when you're running around, when you're doing all of that, it can feel good. To me, most of the bosses did not feel good combat wise. I think part of that is because I'm sure people who are super good at this game, it's like, I only press the parry button when it's necessary or whatever. For most of us, the strategy is just spam that left bumper when they're attacking you, because you're going to block all their attacks. Like, it's either going to block or parry them, and you'll probably parry enough of them to do enough damage to their posture to be okay. And so I think there was some of that, but it also never felt like I got enough health to really matter. I don't know what it would have been like had I not been beating every boss and like picking up all of the prayer beads, like doing all the optional bosses, because even at the end of the game, it was like, okay, if you get hit once, that's like 50 to 75% of your health gone immediately. And if you get hit twice, you're dead. And that was the experience throughout the entire game for me, is basically like 2 to 3 hits, you're dead. That's it. That's all it's going to take for you to die. Which maybe wouldn't be so bad in like a Dark Souls game where they're only making 3 attacks. And so if you get hit by one, you can maybe like dodge or block the other 2. But this is Sekiro, and they're making 47 attacks on you. And so like you don't get a chance to heal in any, like it's basically like, okay, I'm blocking. I hope I don't miss another one, because if I do, I'm dead. And to me, that just never felt good, because I hit the point in every boss that I like hit as a speed bump. Like some bosses, it wasn't really that big of a deal, but like the ones that I would catch and get stuck on for a little bit, like Lady Butterfly, like some others that maybe we'll talk about by name later on in the game or in this episode. I would learn within 2 or 3 runs, like, here is what I need to do in order to beat this guy. Now I just have to play this 15 more times so that I can get a perfect run to do it, because if I get hit twice, I'm dead anyway, you know? Because most of the time I was not running out of the healing item. Most of the time it was like, I still had 5 of the healing item left. It was just I never got an opportunity to like get some distance between me and the boss and he actually use it. I was just getting like 2-shot the entire time. And most of them are coded so that when you use a healing item, they have some sort of BS like charge attack that will hit you. So
yeah, you can definitely see where Melania's inspiration came from.
Even Melania was way easier than that.
No, I don't think so. I think Melania.
Okay. Not all of us are as bad as you.
Melania solo. I mean,
yeah.
I think if you went in and tried to fight Melania solo, because part of that is in Elden Ring, there is no counter for her waterfowl dance. There is no good way.
Yeah, you can't block it. You have to like dodge out of it.
There's no parry or whatever. So it's like we took these Sekiro moves and we threw them in this game where it doesn't really make sense. I wonder if it would have been... I don't think that you would have liked the game anymore, but maybe it would have been less of a sticking point if FromSoft is so committed to their healing item and, you know, and their status effects and all that. And I wonder if it would have been any different if they would have just dropped all that and been like, you get like 2 or 3 hits and the bosses take so many hits and like there is no health bar, you know, kind of just more old school like that. I don't know, but they, you know, then they would have had even less to reward you with throughout the game.
Yeah, well, and like to me, there are definitely ways that I feel like they could have changed some of that up. But the other thing too with the combat, especially with the bosses, is like, okay, you get stuck on Melania in Elden Ring. You can go grind. You can go grind up. You can try a different build. You can try a different, you know, it's like, oh, she's weak to bleed. Let me change out, like, let me spec into this bleed build or whatever to hit her with that, her weakness. In this game, it's basically like, no, Like, if you can't beat Lady Butterfly, like, you can grind a little bit, but like, you're not unlocking more health. You're not unlocking more moves necessarily that are going to help you beat her, because like we mentioned earlier, like pretty much all of the moves that you unlock are not useful in a boss situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like you're pretty much just stuck of like, you either have to beat this or you can go try to like explore some other places, but like if you're not able to beat one of the earlier bosses, then like you're probably still going to have a tough time beating the later bosses that, you know, canonically you're supposed to fight after her.
Right.
You know, like you kind of hit that point where it's just like, oh, okay, so like I just have to get better at this. And you know, I won't say that there isn't some satisfaction of like, okay, I'm starting off, you know, she killed me when she was half health this first time. Now I'm getting her down to like, you know, I'm getting her to phase 2. Okay, now I'm getting her to like, I've almost broken her posture for the second time so that I can kill her. You know, like you can definitely see the progress, but it felt, and I'm not opposed to like the difficulty and you know, dying a bunch to a boss and getting further on. I guess to me, what always felt like the Dark Souls games, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, when I would die in those, it usually didn't feel cheap. Like it usually felt like, okay, I got whittled down. I got greedy. I could have backed off and healed, but I chose to try to get a few more hits in, and I paid the price for it. Whereas in Sekiro, it doesn't feel like that. To me, it feels like tough. We decided that one hit from this boss takes 75% of your health, and we decided that you're basically not going to get a chance to heal, so you can only get hit 2 to 3 times during this fight. Good luck. And to me, that always just felt cheap, personally. Like I still saw the progress. I still, you know, got that hit of satisfaction when I would beat a boss, but it was always kind of like, it was never like oh, I finally did it. It was like, that was way more frustrating than it needed to be. Like, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's definitely cheapness in the other games, but I think that Sekiro doesn't give you anything to help with it, because even in original Dark Souls, you can co-op. You know, there's always something you can do.
Yeah, like
to help to make it a little easier, a little bit more, to give yourself more of an advantage other than just, you know, practicing. Whereas in Sekiro, it is just practicing. It's like they stripped away all of the RPG stuff and made it like Cuphead, or like, you know, an old school like pattern memorization. You got to get the perfect run. That's how you're going to win. Otherwise, you're not going to win.
Yeah, and if you like that, I am not like saying you can't like that or you're wrong for liking that. But it is one of those things where when I played through it and I got to the end, I was like, yep, this is still not one of my favorite FromSoftware games.
Yeah.
Now that I understand the combat a lot better and you know the game a lot better, it's like, will I ever replay it? Maybe. I may do a New Game Plus run just to like get the endings that I haven't gotten or something. But it's not one that I feel like I can keep going, or that I want to keep going back to more than like a Bloodborne or Dark Souls or Elden Ring. And like you said, like FromSoftware has always had a very interesting relationship with like difficulty, at least in their contemporary games, like since Demon's Souls. I can't speak to that random like Monster Hunter Village game that they released, but they've always had a very interesting relationship to difficulty, in that for a lot of their games, there are ways to make the game more difficult or less difficult, but it's never a slider. It's never a like, when you're setting up the game, do you want to play this on story mode or easy or normal or hard or like brutal, or, you know, it's never that. It's always like some obtuse, like hidden in the thing, like you know, Dark Souls 2, for example. It's like, okay, if you choose to enter this covenant, then like the game, like all the enemies are 5 times harder or whatever it is, you know. If you choose to never engage with the magic system in that game, it's like, okay, you don't have to. But there is a lot that you can do with that magic system where you can like just kind of snipe people from a distance and kill them, take out a lot of the enemies and progress. There's ways to, like you said, co-oping in that game where it's like if you run into an issue where you can't beat it, it's like you can summon up to 2 other random players to come in and help you and, like play a bit safer, let them take more of the risks, that sort of thing, and the health does scale and, a little bit like it balances around that, but there are always a lot of optional systems you can engage with in FromSoftware games to make it easier or harder. Elden Ring, you can use the summons, you can use magic, you can use the like Death Star laser to just insta-kill a bunch of stuff, like you can run around with armor, without, like there's so many things that you can do. You can dump a bunch of points into health or not, Whereas this game, it's just like, nope, there's a bell that you can ring to make the game harder. But the base difficulty is always this like extremely ridiculous, unforgiving difficulty. And I just can't help but think that I don't understand how their creative vision would have been hampered had they added in some optional things. Like, just think if they had added in like an optional, hey, your health recharges. Like if you can avoid taking damage, like it's a completely optional thing. The way that we intend you to play this game is to not have that. But if you want to turn the setting on so that you can experience the game and have a better time with it, if you avoid taking damage for so long, your health regenerates, or you get double the healing items, or the healing items do double the, or just like a flat enemies do X percentage less damage. They could even have gotten creative with it and been like, every time you die, the enemies get 1% weaker, and like a Hades type of thing. And it's their creative vision. They decided not to do that. But it's also like, to me, so many of the things in this game are hidden behind just like an obtuse and stupid and frustrating combat system that punishes you if you don't have the like 30 runs to get good at a boss. So
yeah, and I will say, to counter that, for what it's worth, they do have stuff in the game, items in the game that help the player, similar to all other FromSoft games, but also similar to all other FromSoft games. They're slightly obtuse, and you have to get to certain points in the game to unlock them, which, in certain, I guess in Elden Ring, you can go wherever you want and find items. And like in Bloodborne, for example, you can unlock co-op pretty early on, and that can always be an option to help you out. But some of the other things that you might find that help you, you have to progress the game to get there. That's why so many people struggle with Bloodborne, is because Central Yharnam is a tough starting zone for the beginning of the game where you have nothing. And Sekiro is like that too, where as you play, you unlock, we've mentioned like the sugars, which would give you like a buff to damage, buff to health, whatever. You can unlock permanent versions of those that will never, like, they stay in your inventory and you can just use them on like every attempt and not have to farm them. There's the rice, things like that. Like if you pop rice, like you're essentially invincible for however long that's active because your health is coming back so fast. Now, it's a rare item. You can only hold like one of them. So if you use it in an encounter, then you got to go back to where you got it. And you don't have to farm at least, but you got to go talk to the NPC that gives it to you, get another one, come back. So it's tedious, but they do give you some things like status effects. You can pick up different colored gourds that will, they're like the sugars that don't go away. It's like a permanent item you have. So if you're like starting to get poisoned, you can pop that and it drops the poison level back to 0. And so there are things in the game to help with the game, but it's not going to help you subvert the combat. You're still going to have to be able to do what they're asking of you in the fights to progress the game. There are some ways that you can help yourself a little bit, but it's way less than every other FromSoft game.
Yeah. And like you said, a lot of those are hidden behind, like, you have to get so much progress into the game, because all of those like permanent sugars that you can get are you have to kill like the headless bosses in order to unlock those permanently. To kill the head, like you can kill one of the headless, like they're nightmarish creatures or something like that, and so like they take way less damage from your attacks unless you're using like divine confetti or something, some other item, which is not farmable until like mid, like sort of the mid game, end of the early game sort of thing, and it's not purchasable until like the end game basically. So
yeah, most of these items are like mid game items, which is, I was saying for other FromSoft games that's similar, but obviously like we played a lot of Bloodborne co-op and we did that from the start, and similar with Elden Ring. So like there's still way more options in the other games, but there are still some things here, but nothing that's going to be like, okay, if you do this, then you'll be able to just walk through this boss. Like you're still going to have to fight this boss.
Yeah, there's almost never a way to really well to cheese the boss, like there's, like in a lot of other FromSoftware games, it's like if you can get the boss trapped here, or if like you use this item, it makes this boss fight a cakewalk. Here it's like this item makes this boss fight slightly less of a slog than it is. Now, I will say I do like that they didn't fall back on what they do so often in other games that they have made to artificially ramp up the difficulty, in that I don't remember them ever adding, outside of maybe like one or two times, throwing like multiple bosses at you at once. There was one fight with the like gorilla.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that might be the only one.
Yeah, I think that that's the only one that is coming to my mind where there were ever like two big things trying to kill you on screen. So it was always you dueling one other person. Right. So like I will give them that part always felt okay. Like those are usually the bosses that feel kind of cheap to me in the other FromSoftware games, because it's like, oh, okay, like one of these guys is not ridiculous, but they have a ton of health, and there are three of them, Shadows of Yharnam.
Gank Squad in Dark Souls 2. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I guess I want to talk about my experience coming back to the final bosses.
Yeah.
And we can talk about the endings that we got and thoughts on like the story. Is there anything that you want to say before we shift into spoiler territory?
I will say that there is a boss called the Demon of Hatred, and that was one of the only bosses that I will say that I feel like I had fun fighting. And
it's so ironic.
I know, because I had always heard how difficult the boss was, but something clicked in my mind with that boss, because it felt like I was playing Bloodborne. And I played that boss like I fought a Bloodborne boss, and it was like, oh, okay. Like, I understand this. I don't feel like I'm dying from cheap things. I feel like I'm dying because like I messed up, and that is what I wanted from the entire game. And so often it felt like I was dying to like some cheap damage scaling BS.
You fought a better ninja than you.
Yeah, basically.
All right, well, let's, I guess maybe I'll drop in like a clip or some music here, and then when we come back, it'll be full spoilers for Sekiro. We are back in spoiler section, and I saved my experience with coming back to the game for spoilers just because it is the very end of the game. It's still just a boss fight, but basically, Dylan, you decided that you were gonna give Sekiro another shot, and I saw you playing it, and then I saw you kept playing it, and then you were texting me kind of like progress reports as you were playing it, and I was like, we're actually going to be able to do an episode on Sekiro, and I'm going to have to go finish the game because we can't do an episode where Dylan has actually rolled credits and I haven't beat the final boss. And it wasn't just the final boss, it was the Demon of Hatred that you were talking about as well, the optional final boss. I was like, well, I can go back and I'll just beat the final boss or whatever. And then you text me one night and you're like, beat the Demon of Hatred, best boss in the game. And I'm like, this dude is drunk. But now I got to go fight him too. So I jumped in, I played a new save up to a certain point just to kind of get the muscle memory back. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to play the whole game to get back to these guys. So I loaded into my end game save file where I'm literally standing outside the passageway to Sword Saint Ishin. And I'm like, all right, let's see how this goes. And he just stomped me. In fact, Genichiro stomped me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh boy, because in that fight, it's 4 phases. First is Genichiro, who chopped your arm off in the beginning. Then his father cuts himself out of his body with the like black blade of death or whatever. And then you have to fight 3 phases of him. Mm-hmm. First phase, normal fight. Second phase, he starts shooting at you and starts using like these big wind attacks. Third phase, he busts out lightning. Yep. Second phase, by far the worst. So I was like, all right, well, let me try the Demon of Hatred first. I'll knock that out. And then I had to remember how to get to the Demon of Hatred, and the world's all jacked up and on fire, and certain, like, you can't fast travel to certain
you have to go back and like unlock them all spots again.
Yeah. So I figured out how to get back to the Demon of Hatred, got there, and it took me like 2 nights of playing. And finally I ended up getting him.
Now, did it feel like a Bloodborne boss more so than any other boss in the game?
I mean, yeah, it felt more like a Bloodborne boss in the fact that it was essentially like the cleric beast. Like, it looked like a Bloodborne beast. But I still didn't think that, like, other than a couple, like when he would try to step on you, I didn't think that like dodging was still an effective strategy.
Oh, surprising.
Yeah, because
I basically didn't parry at all.
Oh, well, I used the umbrella, the fire umbrella, a lot in that fight.
Yeah, I used that every time he would do like the jump up move and like slam down. And then when he would do like he'd shoot it out at you in a line. But pretty much other than that, I was just being like hyper aggressive and like circling and dodging. And for the most part, like, I could read his movements enough that it was like when he was getting ready to like do the stomp or something, I could dodge effectively out of range and like miss the slam and dodge back in to like start attacking him again. Like, to me, it felt like how I would play Bloodborne.
The move that kept killing me was his dash attack, where you'd see the kanji above his head and he would like charge forward. Once I figured out that all you have to do to negate that is jump.
Yep.
Even if he's right,
game changer,
like on top of you.
Yeah.
Then after that, it was really just like, okay, I need to just have a good run. And then I did have, I went back. I hadn't killed any headless on this playthrough because I had done them on my Shura playthrough. So I went back to the first one that gives you the attack boost candy. I got that. And then I would buff up with that. And then I got him to phase 3 around half health, and he hit me once, and I was like, oh no, I'm not dying here. And so I popped rice. And then while I had the rice active, I just went in and wailed on him and ended up getting it. And it was about 2 nights. End of night 1, I kind of felt like I'm never going to get this. End of night 2, or it must have been like start of night 2, where I like got the jump thing down.
Yeah.
Because then once I had that and I could negate that move, because that move just felt like
cheap.
Yeah, unbeatable until I figured that out and was like, oh, okay. Because, yeah, for the most part, everything that these bosses do has a counter. You just have to figure out what it is.
Yeah.
So
it does feel like the game that you could get through with like a no-hit run easiest.
Right, yeah. You just have to do it well enough.
Yeah.
So I beat Demon of Hatred, and once I beat him, I was like, okay, I can do this. And then I went and I fought Ishin. That took me 2 nights. And when I say 2 nights, I mean like kid went to bed. So it's between the hours of like 8 and 9:30 I'm playing. and I'm probably doing like 5 attempts, something like that.
Yeah.
Before I'm like, I'm too tired. I'm not going to get it tonight. It's not like I was playing all night long or anything. But so then I went back, final boss. That one was really just kind of getting used to the flow of the fight again. I would go in, if I didn't beat Genichiro without taking a hit, then I would basically just let him kill me and start over, because it's like, you should be able to just take him down. Like, you run up to him, get behind his back, Ichimonji him a couple times, parry him a few times, like he's dead. First phase of the last boss, I didn't really have too many problems with, unless I just like read something wrong. It was that second phase. Once I could consistently get him either past that second phase or close to it, then I knew I had it. Once I could get him to the third phase, like, I'm pretty decent at lightning deflection. It's a kind of weird, like,
you have to get hit mechanic in the air.
Yeah, you have to jump and deflect, as opposed to like doing it on the ground, which makes sense because you're not grounded. So like, it makes sense in that aspect, but also you're deflecting lightning, which is completely impossible. So like,
Zuko would disagree with you.
That's also not reality.
I don't know about that.
But yeah, so once I got him to phase 3, I think like the second time I got him to phase 3, I popped a sugar and maybe like a rice ball. And then there's one other item that was like a rare item, and I popped one of those, I think. And then I went in. I still played it pretty safe with those things on, but yeah, I managed to get him down, and I was like, all right, nice. That one I felt like I got back up to speed quicker than the Demon of Hatred, but the Demon of Hatred is also just a very unusual fight for the game it's in. But a really cool fight and a really cool character moment. And so I'm kind of curious, like, what you thought of the characters and the story and the ending, since we are in spoiler territory. You've talked a lot about your woes with the gameplay, but what did you think of the lore?
Yeah, I mean, the lore was cool. Like, stylistically, story-wise, like, it's always, just like even that first little bit where you're, trying to break the young master, I forget his name, out of
Kuro.
And you meet Genichiro the first time in like that field of flowers or whatever, and you fight him and he cuts your arm off. Like, it's just so stylistic and cool, and just kind of like running around and like meeting the sculptor and Lady Emma and the owl and all of these other characters. Like, it's a very interesting like cast of characters. Like you said, I do feel like it's way more straightforward. Like, I felt like I did understand the bare bones story, where it's like, okay, you're the kid has dragon rot, or the kid has dragon blood, or whatever, and
which gives him rejuvenating powers, which is why you can come back to life. Yeah.
And it's magical, and so like other people want him because they think it'll help them, win their wars or whatever. That's why Genichiro's after him.
Right.
And Lady Emma is the person who takes care of him and takes care of Genichiro's dad, who doesn't want, is kind of like, this is wrong, we shouldn't be doing this. Owl is like, a backstabbing traitor, but he's also your dad. And so it's like, there's, tension there. And like the entire time, like, your journey is much more straightforward. Like in Elden Ring, it's kind of like, become the Elden Lord,
right?
Whatever that is, whatever that means, go figure it out. Whereas this is like, hey, you're protecting this kid, that's your job, he needs protection, like, he's been kidnapped, go free him from the kidnapping. And then once that's happening, then it's like, okay, people want this divine blood, figure out how to deal with that, and then we'll progress. Like, and they kind of give you like, here's like 3 things that we need to figure out how we deal with this divine blood. And you like go 3 different places, you collect those things, you bring them back. And then it's like, okay, here's how we can deal with the divine blood. And, now go get these other couple of things, and you go out, you get those things. And from, depending on your choices along the way, you can kind of get to the point where it's like, okay, now you've got these like 3 options for the end, if you didn't just betray everybody and side with your dad and Genichiro. So,
which is such a weird choice. I
and it occurs halfway through the game.
Yeah, you lock yourself out of like half of the game if you choose to do that, which is it's interesting. It's like an interesting choice, but it's so weird. I mean, most people won't get that ending. The only reason I saw it on that playthrough is because I was trying to get all the endings in one playthrough. I was trying to save scum it, and it backfired. All the while, back to like just the main story arc, the like kind of last, I guess there's a couple more wrinkles. One being that because he has like dragon's blood, like you can tell this is like a magical.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of like mysticism and magic and stuff in this world. So there's that. But the other thing is that Ashina, the land you're in, is like at a point in their lives, the point in their history, I guess, where they're kind of weak. They're weakening. They're not the superpower they once were. And like other forces are like trying to infiltrate. And so like every FromSoft game kind of has phase changes as it goes. And one of the phase changes in this game is that at the end, like Ashina's under siege. And so like all that kind of stuff is cool too. Just more of like the set dressing, I guess, the kind of, it's not real history, but it's kind of based in real history.
Yeah.
Of like
the
a lot stuff that's going on in the land.
Yeah. Cause I can't remember when I was watching like Vati Vidya, but I feel like he said that like at least some of the names of like these people were people that like existed.
Yeah, and I've heard that like the ministry that's like referenced to like that is coming in and trying to take over Ashina, like I think they're either based on or straight up are like some sort of thing that actually happened. So it's actually it's a fictionalized Japan, which is what, you know, we read at the beginning of the episode, but it is still kind of like based on Japan and like some of that history and things that happen, which is cool. It's like you said, it's even if you don't jive with the combat, which I think is why it frustrates you so much that you don't jive with it and that there's not like options to make this game easier so that more people can experience it, is because it's cool if you get to experience it.
Yeah, because like, you know, like the combat was not my favorite, but like the story, the game, the setting, the like the, you know, getting to a new zone and being like, oh, there's a giant snake here. Like that was one of the coolest parts of this game. Like you get to this zone and like you're starting to walk through it and all of a sudden there's like a giant snake. And that like part of the zone is just like sneaking through, trying to avoid the snake seeing you so that you can get close enough to it to like stab it so that it'll leave you alone. That's just such a cool, unique part of, you know, a FromSoftware game and this game. And it's just very stylistic. And it's those kind of things where I'm just like, man, I wish more people could like experience this and play this, because, you know, like I was able to get through it because like I'm stubborn and I was enjoying it enough that I wanted to continue to like try to push through it. And I knew that like it's not a skill difficulty. It's just like I just gotta like keep doing this until I get like I know what I need to do. I just need to actually execute the plan, you know.
Right.
It wasn't like I was going in and I was like, I have no idea how to beat this boss. It was like, no, I know how to beat this boss. It's just they hit me one time, so this run's a wash. And so like there's so many cool parts of this game. And like you said, I do wish there were, you know, they weren't so dead set on like their uncompromising vision of no, it has to be the most challenging, one of the most challenging games in recent history.
Yeah, for sure. I think that before Elden Ring, this was my second favorite, like lore-wise, out of all the FromSoftware games, next to Bloodborne. Elden Ring I really like, and there's so much in Elden Ring that it's kind of, I think it might be pushing for number 2 now, but Sekiro I was very fascinated with the whole way through. As part of what was drawing me through is just the world and the weird kind of characters and monsters and what's going on.
Yeah, because like you constantly like there are way more characters than I thought there were going to be. Like, because for a lot of the game, you just kind of bump into like Emma, the sculptor, Genichiro, and like the young prince guy, and that's pretty much like who it is. Like in a flashback, you see Owl and Lady Butterfly, but there aren't like people that are recurring and showing up. But then like the more that you do it, like there's that guy that's looking for the person who plays the little, I forget what it's called, but it's like the 2 or 3 stringed like kind of ukulele guitar looking, stringed
like a
instrument.
mandolin or like
something like that. He's looking
like a
for
lyre.
like a seisen player or something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. And like you bump into the pot nobles that want to feed the koi fish. You like there's so many like different little people. Like you bump into the monk dude who is like, everyone left me, like where do I go now? And you can either send him to like this crazy doctor who is clearly evil, or you can send him to like kind of the sketchy like rogue that like hopefully has a better outlook for him,
Right.
like
Yeah.
so like there are all these little people that you run into that I think had a much more straightforward side. Like so many of the other FromSoftware games, it's like, did you go to this place during this part of the game? If so, hopefully you talk to this person, because if not, like you're locked out of the side quest for the rest of it. Whereas this felt much more organic. It felt, and I think that speaks to it being a more linear game where they could more easily put like, here's where you find this guy first, and then as you progress further, you find him again. And, so I do think that was pretty cool. And just like some of the places the game goes, it's like, oh, you go to like the divine realm or whatever, like this
and you fight a dragon.
Yeah, this big, which at first when I was fighting the dragon, it was like, oh, you're gonna go fight the dragon, and then all those like tiny little withered looking dragons popped up, and I was like, this is such a weird game. And then like
it's still a weird game.
Yeah, then you actually fight like the big dragon. That was a really cool fight.
Yeah,
I will say that the gimmick fights in this game I liked so much better than almost every other gimmick fight in FromSoftware history.
Because they could tailor them to the one play style rather than having to be like, okay, pick up this gimmick weapon or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like you fight like the monkeys or whatever, where you've got to like chase them around the map into like the spot that they're weak in so that you can get the death blow. Like it's like, oh, this monkey can see you really well. So you have to like turn out the lights and chase him into that room so you can death blow him and stuff, which is just really
see
cool.
No evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Monkeys.
And then the dragon fight where it's like you kill a bunch of the withered dragons, and then it turns into like you have to just like get that. I hope you learned how to lightning deflect, because you have to do it in that boss fight. But that was super cool.
Yeah, I agree. What did you think about your main character from Dark Souls showing up to fight you on that bridge?
Yeah, that was weird. That was very weird. That was a little bit of a frustrating fight because like I knew what I needed to do. I just couldn't get him to like
destroy the bridge.
Well, no, I couldn't get him close enough to the edge when I would like do whatever, like the Makiri counter or whatever it was that you had to do to like shove him back. Like, but that was a super weird part that did feel a bit out of place.
I'm sure Vati, I'm pretty sure I've like watched videos on like who that's supposed to be or why, but
I think one of his,
in the context of the games, it's just like, what? There's just this knight with a greatsword here.
Because it's an area with like, the only other things you're fighting in that area are like a bunch of Buddhist monks, I think.
Mm-hmm. And those little like ugly little gremlin dudes.
The gremlin peoples. And then like this big armored knight, which I think Vati said was like, his kid was like one of the kids that the monks were trying to turn into like a divine being that died or something like that. But
yeah, he yells Robert when you knock him off the bridge. That's kind of like a meme in the From community, is the Robert thing. But yeah, I guess we can touch on endings if you want, and then any other kind of wrap up stuff we want to do before we move into our verdicts.
Sure. Well, why don't you go over the Shura ending first, because you did get the Shura ending, and that's like the one that occurs halfway through the game. And then we can like the other three all happen like at the end of the game, and it's basically like you get to choose like which of the three endings you want based on
what you
what
did
you
throughout
have.
the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Shura ending, Shura means hatred, I think, or is like related to hatred. That's what happens to the sculptor is he goes Shura, and that's why he becomes the demon of hatred. So if you basically halfway through the game, Owl shows up at Lord Kuro's castle and he says, "Hey, you're still my ward, so you have to do what I said, and I want you to." He just wants you to take the kid. I don't think you can't kill him. So I guess he just wants you to like take him, like join him and take the kid, and they'll go off. And so most normal people will say, "Nah, screw you. I'm siding with Kuro," because it's also a little bit odd that he's there in the first place because you thought he died. So there's a lot of red flags there. But if you decide to side with your dad, then Lady Emma busts out a sword and she comes out and fights you on that like balcony where you have quite a few fights. You fight Genichiro there. You fight Owl there if you tell him no. And so you fight Emma. I think she's one of the few bosses that only has one health bar. And then once you whittle her down, then Old Man Ishin comes out and you have to fight him while everything is on fire. And that's a pretty tough fight, especially at that point in the game. And then, yeah, if you beat him, then you get the Shura ending where you and Owl take Kuro away and everything burns down. I think Sekiro gives the camera like some sort of devious smile or something. And it's really, it's interesting, like thematically, but it's also just really weird. It's weirdly placed and weirdly like kind of out of character for Sekiro. Like it doesn't, not much I feel like builds up to that other than the fact that he's killed a lot of people, so maybe he's going a little crazy inside. But like, so yeah, that one, I think it's an interesting idea that I could say this for a lot of stuff in Sekiro. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas that if they ever got to tweak them or expand on them or take another crack at them, they could do a lot better with. And I think this is one of them. Then, yeah, the last ending, the real ending, basically, if you rushed your way through the game, you get like the bad ending, which I can't really remember what happens there. You kill Lord Kuro, right?
No. So there are several different things that you can do. And basically, so the halfway through the game, if you don't do the Shura ending, you get to the point where it's like, okay, the divine blood is what's causing all these issues, so we got to figure out how to deal with the divine blood. So as you progress,
blade, which is sick.
Yeah, you find a mortal blade, which is like one of the only things that can hurt a person of the divine blood. But essentially, it's like, okay, you find out pretty much you mostly can't get rid of the divine blood. You can use the mortal blade to kill the divine being or the child with the divine blood, and that'll fix it. That'll end the dragon rot plague, and that'll, that person won't be here anymore. That'll kill them so that there isn't that possibility of people abusing their blood again. And obviously, like, that's not a great option because that means you got to kill Lord Kuro, the kid. Another of the options is like you can choose to kill yourself, which returns the blood or purifies the blood or something like that. And it allows him to keep living, but like Sekiro dies. And then there's like I guess the true ending, which requires a lot of like actually doing stuff.
And that's what
as
we
you
both
progress
got,
through,
right?
yeah, yes, and that's the one where it's like your Lord Kuro is cocooned or something, and like basically they're taking the divine blood comes from a dragon that came out of like China or Korea or something, and they're like came into Japan, and they are returning the dragon back to its homeland in order to free Lord Kuro, or Lord Kuro is the dragon. I was a little unclear on like but basically it was also taking him out of play, but it wasn't killing him, and it was the one everyone was the most happy with and everyone lived in. So
sort of lived, right? Because that's the one where there's Lord Kuro, who is the pure divine heir. But then there's this other little girl that you find in the temple that is like the man-made version of the divine
Store-bought.
heir. Yeah, the wish version.
Yeah.
And she helps you. She's the one you get the rice from. She will help you with that final quest of like, putting the magic back. And she's the one you're doing all the extra stuff for to be able to like get this ending. But in this ending, Genichiro like hurts Kuro before you do the final fight. And so the way it plays out is you beat the final boss, then you go up to Kuro's body and you're presented with like the 3 choices depending on what you've done throughout the game. If you do the good one, he still like kind of dies, right? But his spirit goes into the girl. So then that girl's body has 2 consciousnesses in it.
Yeah, that's the part I wasn't super clear on.
Like that's
whether
how
he was
read
like
it.
dead, or whether like he was being reborn from her or something.
It got a little like sci-fi there.
Yeah.
In that ending part, but essentially, like Kuro's still alive in spirit somehow. Whether his spirit is in the same body as the girl's, because she's like, he's happy or he's this, or like he can communicate through her, but also she's still very much in her body. So it's like they're both sharing this body, and so then you and the girl like kind of ride off into the sunset at the end to continue your quest, which I was like, cool. That's pretty good for a FromSoft ending.
Yeah,
just a little weird and a little confusing, like they always are. And I'm sure I could probably go refresh my Vati videos that I haven't watched in a while and maybe get some clearer perspective on all that. But yeah, that's what we both did. I think when you played through the game, you were following like here's some important things you need to do guide, but it wasn't like a step-by-step kind of we're going to spoil it for you guide.
Yeah, it didn't spoil anything, but it was just like it was basically like a checklist on my phone of like, in each zone, it's like pick up this shinobi tool, pick up this shinobi tool, like pick up this book, talk to this person or whatever. And so it wasn't like you're doing this so you can get this ending necessarily. It was more so like you're going through by the checklist. I was just using it to make sure I didn't leave like a shinobi tool or, something. It's like, oh, there's one of those in this zone. Let me explore around and try to find it, sort of thing. And so I did all of that as I was like, for the most part, it wasn't like ridiculously hard to get that ending, but there was a point where it was like you had to like talk to the girl like 5 or 6 different times to get rice in order for her to like eventually tell you that there was another option or something like that. Yeah, you
had to get rice from her like 3 or 4 times throughout your playthrough, yeah.
And like give her a certain book, which like wasn't extremely hard to come across.
And give her
like
persimmons or something.
Yeah. Which like I thought that was going to be a challenging part, but like I just had some on me when I got to that part.
Basically, as long as you don't do anything else with them or consume them, you'll have enough. But yeah.
But yeah, so it wasn't like extremely ridiculous to get to, but it was like definitely like you always have access to the one where Lord Koro dies. And then if you do like a slight bit of talking to a couple of other people, you can do the one where Sekiro dies. But this one is the one that's like, no, you actually have to like do some quest steps to get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People can speedrun this game in like without breaking it in like a couple hours.
Yeah, because it is definitely one where it's like I can see it being, since there are no other options, no other builds that you can do. It's basically like, okay, once you know how to beat Lady Butterfly, once you know how to beat Genichiro, once you know how to beat Owl, it's like, yeah, just go through and beat them. Like you've seen all the moves. They're not going to spring anything new on you. Like if you're trying to fight Demon of Hatred again, it's like you now know forever, like, oh, I can jump to avoid that charge attack, Yep. And so it does make sense that it would be way more just straightforward. And also, like, if you're not trying to explore because you don't need to, it's a lot more straight and like I'm trying to think of the word.
Linear?
Literal is not linear. Linear
Yeah.
is the word I'm trying to think of. Like, it's just like run from boss to boss to boss. So
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and roll into our verdicts. We've already surpassed our Bloodborne episode in length, and we're
that's unfortunate.
getting ready to surpass our Plague Tale episode, where we talked about 2 games. So let's go ahead and get into our verdicts here. How we rank these games is on the classic A through F scale, except above A there is S, and that is a masterpiece. So F is hot garbage, S is masterpiece. I would give this game an A. Sekiro for me is an A. Like I've said multiple times throughout this episode, I think there's a lot of things that they could iterate on, or maybe even straight up remove, or they could tweak to make the experience better, or make like if a sequel or a similar game better. But for me, the combat system really clicked. I really love the world. I love the fast pacedness of it. I like the linearity of it. I wouldn't want every single FromSoft game to be like this, but as a nice kind of change of pace, I really enjoy Sekiro. I'm curious to see where it lands for you. I have a guess, but I'm curious to see if I'm going to be right or not.
Yeah. So this is probably one of the most challenging games I've had to come up with a verdict for, because taking my own opinion out of it, this game is an A, maybe even an S. You know, like it is a very, very good game mechanics wise.
But you're ranking it based on your opinion.
But based on my opinion, I think that this game is a B.
Oh, okay.
At best, like a low B.
Uh-huh.
Maybe even borderline C, depending on, you know, how many times I've fought a boss.
I thought you were going to go like strong C. I thought you were going to say C like right out the gate.
No. So like if I had not finished the game, I probably would say C. Now that I have gotten to the point in the game where it allows me to get health back for doing a death blow, and for, you know, like I understand how its perilous attack warning works now, you know, that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, I can see like some of it was, you know, some of my earlier attempts where I just absolutely hated it were more of like I just wasn't getting the system. It wasn't clicking with me. That said, I do still wish that more people could experience the game, because it is a very cool setting. I think the story is very interesting. The combat does feel very good when you're like actually getting it and clicking. I feel like it just is arbitrarily too grindy for a lot of the points and bosses. And it's just, you know, like there's so many things where it's like, I'm not saying everyone needs to play it this way, or if you played it and enjoyed it as is base Sekiro, you're in the wrong for it. But for me, it's like I wanted something that wasn't just so grindy and frustrating and felt like it wasn't respecting my time. And I wanted something that allowed me to explore and made that a little bit more worthwhile. My favorite parts of the game exploring were like coming across a new, like finally getting through to a new area and being like, oh, this is beautiful. Or, you know, finding like one of the little secret walls that flips, and it's like, oh, okay, like now there's a secret that's hidden in here. It usually wasn't like super rewarding, but I was like, oh, there's something unique and cool here. And so it does a lot of things very well. The combat is cool. The game itself is cool. The story is cool. I just wish it wasn't wrapped in such a frustrating box. So, like I said, I still don't think it's a bad game. I still don't think I would put it as like this is a game you shouldn't play.
Right.
But it is a game that I don't think it was unwarranted, the amount of like kind of discourse that surrounded it about the difficulty and just how uncompromising it was. And I know that FromSoftware has almost made a name off of difficulty, but I wish there were, like, I hope they continue the trend moving forward that we've seen in more recent games, where there are more options I would love to see a FromSoftware game with accessibility options that allowed everyone to play it by just making the enemies less challenging, or making a story mode, or making something like that. They don't have to, but man, there are a lot of people that would be FromSoftware fans if they weren't so dead set on making everything so obtuse. So
yeah, you're probably right. Cool. Well, that's our Sekiro episode. It was beefy. I knew it would be a good conversation. I knew we'd have a lot to say. We probably could say more, and I'm sure you and I will continue to have conversations about it just off mic. But is there anything that you want to say, housekeeping wise, or in closing as we wrap this thing up?
Not that I can think of. I don't really know when this is coming out, so I don't know what's around it. So
just a blanket statement to go check out our YouTube channel.
Check out the YouTube, Discord, that kind of thing. So
yeah, for sure. And if you'd like to do more to support the show, if you like what we do, if you like our content, if you like our perspectives, if you like what we provide, if it gives you some sort of value, there is now an option for you to give back a little bit. The link is in the description. Basically, it is a subscription membership sort of service where you can throw us a few bucks to say, hey, I love what you're doing. Keep it up. Want to support you. This is like ground level options here that we can build on as we grow. If we start bringing in some money, if we start, as I wrap up school, as we get some more free time, if this takes off, if we start getting more monetary support, whatever, there is the means here for us to start doing potentially bonus content, things like that, or, stuff for people who have decided to help us out in this way. Right now, it's just you saying, hey, I like what you're doing and I want to do this. And, we probably shout you out or something, but just want to throw that out there. It's in our description. You can definitely check it out if that sounds like something you're interested in. If not, reviews, ratings, comments on YouTube videos, likes, subscriptions on YouTube, those are all free and they're all extremely helpful in helping us grow our content and our community. So that is my little plea here at the end. But other than that, I think that's about it. This is a good place to call it. So with all that, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Friendly Neighborhood Gamers podcast. If so, we would greatly appreciate your help in growing the show and the community by giving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any other podcasting app that allows it.
We also have some great videos on our YouTube channel, including reviews, rankings, and other topics. We would really appreciate you checking it out. And if you want to keep up with everything going on in the neighborhood, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and feel free to jump in our Discord server.
We hope to see you there. Links for everything are in the podcast description. Thanks again for listening, and remember, stay friendly, gamers.